Welcome back to the Healthy and Happy podcast series. I am joined today with one of my very favorite people in the whole world. This is Cindy Miles, and Cindy is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. Did I say that right?
Yes.
And as you'll see as we visit here over the next little bit, Cindy is extremely knowledgeable and well-versed in the connection between mental and emotional health and nutrition. And nutrition is one of the important pieces that we try to help people address in the Healthy and Happy program, because it's so important in terms of neurotransmitter health and neurotransmitter production. It's a great resource in life, and really affects things, of course, when it's not going well. So, Cindy, what do you want to say to kind of introduce yourself? Or
yeah, hi, I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad we can talk about this subject. It's tremendously important to me. I've had friends, family members, clients struggle with all kinds of brain health issues for as long as I can remember. And it's really great to be able to understand some of what's behind that, some of the things that can be missing that would be able to give you better brain health, and some of the things that you might be including in your life that are hindering your brain health. And I like the way recently there's a trend to referring to mental illness or mental health issues as brain health issues, because they really are. Just as much as cardiovascular disease is a heart health issue, a lot of our mental and emotional issues are brain health issues.
Yeah, physiological issues.
Exactly.
And if you don't address that physiology, you can't just power through a neurochemical problem. And we spend a lot of time doing a lot of other things other than the things that will help fix and repair the biology of it, the physiology of it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We can talk about different areas, but what are some of the things that some of the information or aspects of the relationship between nutrition and brain health that you think are most important?
Well, that is a huge question, but one of, I guess I like to think of it on the level of neurotransmitter production, which neurotransmitters are your good mood or bad mood chemical, your brain chemicals that affect your mood and how you're feeling. If you don't have the basic building blocks, you can't make certain neurotransmitters. If you don't have the nutritional cofactors for those building blocks, you can't make neurotransmitters effectively. If you think of serotonin is a really well-known neurotransmitter that's associated with feeling good, feeling happy, playful, flexible.
Sleep, relaxation, sex drive.
Yes, it's associated with that. Affects your appetite, your body's fullness and satiety signals. If you don't have tryptophan to make serotonin, you're in trouble. Tryptophan is an amino acid, which is a protein building block that is used to make serotonin. So you need that, but you also need, like if you're making chocolate chip cookies, let's say you need the flour and, maybe that's your big ingredient, or maybe chocolate chips are your big ingredient. So think of that as your amino acid building block or your tryptophan. But you also need the baking powder, the salt, whatever those other little things are that you put into cookies to make them actually come out right. So that would be your nutritional cofactors like magnesium, B6, folate, B12.
And so if you don't have the cofactors, even if you have the main ingredient so the tryptophan in this case that our brains use to produce serotonin, our brains can't do that without the other important cofactors as well.
Right. You're going to have limitations. And when you've got limitations, you can't make enough of what you're trying to make. So the way proteins are strung together with different amino acids, and so neurotransmitters are proteins. It's like beads in a necklace. You need all the different amino acids that make that protein, whether it's an immune cell, whatever protein. And if you don't have all the amino acids, you can't make the pearl necklace or the bead necklace.
Yeah.
If you any of those beads, you don't kind of make a sort of a bead necklace. You just unstrip the whole thing. And you don't make it.
Yeah, you don't want it to look like a 3-year-old made the bead necklace.
Right. Nor do you want to
like
feel
a 5
like
or 6-year-old, right? Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And we hear a lot about like serotonin and dopamine and some of these neurotransmitters, and people may not even know that those are neurotransmitters. And it's a really good point that Cindy is making. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that tell cells to do something. And every cell has a job, and excitatory neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine tell the cell to do more of whatever their job is. And so it's excitatory neurotransmitters are like the gas pedal of the brain. They are sent out. They're like little mailmen when we need more motivation or more focus. Then our brains will tell the nerve cells to send dopamine, and they're these little mailmen that go over and take dopamine to that cell and tell the cell to do more of what its job is. And inhibitory neurotransmitters do just the opposite. Inhibitory neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA are like the brake pedal. And so when things are revving too much, the brain says, hey, we need some brake pedal over there. We need to slow things down so that maybe we can slow down and focus so that we can remember the things that we've studied for a test, or so that we can slow down and sleep. And so when we need the brake pedal, then the brain says, hey, send some serotonin or some GABA over there to slow things down. So that's kind of how neurotransmitters work, for those of you that might be unfamiliar with neurotransmitters. And if we don't have healthy levels of neurotransmitters, and if they're not moving through our brains, it doesn't matter how badly you want to be able to remember, or how badly you want to be able to have motivation to get up and go. Our brains can't work with nothing. And nutrition is one of the important building blocks for the production of neurotransmitters.
Yes, for the production. And as you're describing that process, it made me think of also all of these cellular messengers you were talking about, and chemical messengers, they operate at the cell membrane. So you need a very healthy cell membrane to be able to receive and respond properly to messages. And one of the biggest nutritional problems we have here in the States is we have very low levels of omega-3 fatty acids. So the healthy fatty acid you get from salmon, mackerel, sardines, and those types of sources, we have levels that are so low. We're having massive problems with cellular communication, with cellular flexibility. That relates to depression. I just recently saw a comparison study that was showing different omega-3 fatty acid levels in people and associating them with brain health issues. Actually, I think it was University of Cincinnati Medical School evaluated the omega-3 levels of their inpatients in the psychiatric unit, and the average level was something like 3.2. We should be over 8. We should be over 8. Average American is maybe 5.1. Autism is like 1 point something, very low. Bipolar is 3.1. But anyway, it was lining up the average omega-3 blood levels in various brain health and mental health conditions. And the lower your level, the harder a time you're going to have. It's just really hard for your brain to work if you don't have the right building blocks and materials. And
so omega-3s work in particular to help with that cellular membrane?
Yes, and they're very, very well researched, and high omega-3 levels are associated with improvement from depression, anxiety, ADD, temporal lobe, mood instability issues, even cyclic depression issues like bipolar. So you can use omega-3s therapeutically for those, and higher omega-3 levels are associated with lower levels of illness. Lower levels of omega-3 are associated with higher levels of illness. We've got to have them. The average American now, we should have a ratio of about 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 omega-3 to omega-6. Most Americans have like 20 to 30 to 1 omega, about 20 times as many omega-6 as omega-3, and they compete for space in the cell membrane. So omega-6 are fats you'd get from vegetable oils, baked goods, things like that. What our diet is massively made of.
And so if there are too many, if there's too much omega-6, then it's taking up all the space and there's not room for the omega-3.
Yeah, there's a competition issue, and there also is a lack issue. If you, just the same way that fatty acids can displace each other in the cell membrane, we displace them in our diets if we're eating too much. 10% of Americans get 10% of their calories from soybean oil without even knowing it, because isn't that amazing? But that's an omega-6 oil that's highly inflammatory, which causes brain disease and heart disease and all kinds of disease in the body. So if you amp up the inflammation, you'll create problems. You can create depression just from amping up inflammation. But then also you've got the issue that you're having a toxic omega-6 fat instead of a helpful omega-3 fat. So
let's talk a little bit about inflammation. Inflammation is probably something that a lot of people have heard a lot about. Why does it matter, and what does it do?
So some inflammation is good. Your body needs to have a nice ability to have an inflammatory response to dilate blood vessels, bring, immune cells to a problem area if you have an injury, an illness, what have you. So that those inflammatory messengers should come, fight the bad guy, and leave. But what we tend to have, and so we should inflame and then anti-inflame, right? But what we tend to have when we have dietary problems, and we're not eating whole nutritious food that's rich in nutrients and lowers inflammation in the body, if we're eating inflammatory foods like processed fast foods and such, we will have runaway inflammation. So it's what's considered a low-level inflammation, subclinical inflammation, but it's kind of like you've got a burning going on all the time. So those inflammatory immune cells are actually damaging your own tissue. Instead of fighting a bad guy and then leaving, they're kind of staying,
like good guys too,
waging war on your own tissues. So, and in the brain, inflammation in the brain is very associated with depression, anxiety, ADHD, that, a slew of things. Inflammation, a while back, maybe a decade or more ago, was determined to be the main cause of heart disease. So where just the same way as probably 50 or 70 years ago, it was realized that inflammation was the main issue with asthma. So what are some things that we can do to lower the overall level of inflammation in our systems? That's a good question. We can eat whole foods in their intact form, like an apple, apples, chicken, well-produced chicken, like pasture-raised, organic. You try to eat food that isn't loaded with toxins, because that'll increase inflammation. And you try to avoid processed food. Like if I go to McDonald's, I can be sure I'm going to have an inflammatory meal. You've got the poorly raised beef, you've got toxic chemicals, you got soybean oil that's, soy is, the crop is doused with chemicals that are very dangerous and are associated, the glyphosate is associated with a 40% higher cancer risk. And it's just, chemicals and toxins are going to be inflammatory, and processed foods are going to be inflammatory. Your whole natural foods, like if you think what your grandparents ate, that's probably going to be anti-inflammatory. Salmon, wild caught salmon, your fruits and vegetables. If you're going to have some nice grains, have have them intact as much as possible. You can have, steel cut oats. Try not to have the completely powdered grains. Like, if you want to have some cracked wheat, awesome. Or if you want to have some whole, whole grains that are made into flour, some is okay. For some people, even that's a little more inflammatory once it's ground into flour. But your main thing is whole foods. Like this is Gustave Caillet's fruit on a stand. Those are all lovely anti-inflammatory foods. You got apples, pears, blueberries.
Take a close up of it. What are some of the brain health issues or emotional health issues that can be positively affected by nutrition?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's hard to think of what can't be positively affected by nutrition. Everything from mild depression and anxiety to severe depression and anxiety, bipolar depression, which is considered quite severe. It can be very life-threatening and rather crippling. Schizophrenia is even affected by nutrition. There were some interesting studies that removing gluten from the diet of schizophrenics, a significant number had remission of symptoms to the point that they didn't even qualify for the diagnosis. And there's some trend in the nutritional therapy and brain health arena talking about true bipolar diagnoses or true schizophrenia diagnoses, because so often things are being
misdiagnosed.
They're being misdiagnosed. They're thought to be one thing when they could be corrected by something else. And even Alzheimer's, there are so many studies that link Alzheimer's with nutrition. Alzheimer's is called by researchers type 3 diabetes because your blood sugar is so relevant. Having higher blood sugar, even in the top of the normal range, like up to 100 is considered normal, 70 to 100. And if even 90 to 100 doubles your risk of Alzheimer's because of the way that the blood sugar is handled and the way that it affects the cells. But autism is affected by nutrition. Name a mental illness. I can't think of one that isn't. I can't think of one that I haven't seen studies that show improvement with certain nutritional strategies. And sometimes it's, whole food diet is absolutely where to start. Reducing the processed foods as much as you can. You want to have a treat now and then, that's fine. You actually recently put it the best I've ever heard it put when you said, the more symptomatic you are, the more careful you have to be. You don't want to cause people to go to great extremes and panic over every morsel of food they're putting in their body and worry about those things.
Right. You can create more anxiety than you're trying to fix, right?
Right. But we do want to think of nutrition and healthy eating as abundance of good things, and just go first to the nice, high quality, protein, beautiful, good fats like avocados, olives, nuts, your beautiful fruits and vegetables of all different colors. Then you're hitting the antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, protein building blocks for neurotransmitters and your good mood chemicals. If you're getting all those fruits and vegetables, you're getting a number of the nutritional cofactors as well. Most people like to supplement also because soils are depleted. We're not getting the mineral and vitamin abundance in foods that we used to because of farming practices. So a supplement is great with things like turmeric that help Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, all kinds of inflammatory issues. You'd have to get the amount of curcumin in turmeric that is successful in studies. You'd have to eat like 2 pounds of turmeric root. So probably better to take a supplement, right? Yeah. You get a more concentrated effect. But always the starting point is going to be a good whole food diet, plenty of hydration. People don't realize how much hydration affects your brain health and your cognitive ability. Even a 2% reduction in hydration can cause a decrease. They did a study with pilots. They found their spatial abilities were decreased, their cognitive abilities were decreased. I mean, it happens to all of us. But
so what is good hydration?
Good hydration. Okay, great question. Good, clean, filtered water. Sometimes you might want to add some electrolyte minerals to it. Most people would benefit from, having some potassium and some other good minerals.
How do you do that?
You can take a supplement. You can take a pinch of sea salt. Sea salt is a really fun thing because, it occurred in nature. The beauty of things occurring in nature is that they're complete. So sea salt comes as opposed to table salt, which is sodium chloride and is stripped of all the other minerals. Sea salt has a nice, perfectly balanced array of different minerals, the trace minerals, the bigger mineral. I mean, it's just beautiful. And they're in the right proportions to each other. So you can take a little pinch of sea salt, put it in your water, and that'll increase your hydration if your cells aren't really holding. Sometimes you feel like you're drinking and you're still not holding onto the water enough. That can help. It's the whole things in nature are amazing. Even, with the sugar controversies, because we know sugar can increase ADD symptoms, depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and then we just talked about the Alzheimer's bit. But even with sugar, when it occurs in nature, in the sugar cane, nature packaged it with magnesium. You blow through magnesium when your body's processing sugar. And so it's packaged with magnesium. It's packaged with chromium, which is also called glucose tolerance factor, because it helps your body process sugar.
The sugar.
It's packaged with the B vitamins and all the things you need to handle the amount of sugar, and a bunch of fiber so that it doesn't just hit your bloodstream and cause problems for you.
Yeah. So are there like standard sort of baseline levels of how many ounces of water to drink a day?
Yeah, the general guideline is, I think most of us heard, 8 ounce glasses a day. And so more specific to an individual would be half of your body weight in ounces of water. So if you weigh 150 pounds, 75 ounces of water a day. If you're also consuming dehydrating beverages like coffee, tea, diet sodas, whatever, or full sodas, cheers. But if you're also consuming dehydrating beverages, you want to add 1.5. So if you have 8 ounces of coffee or Coke or whatever, then 8 ounces of that, you want to have an additional 12 ounces of water because it's a little dehydrating.
Right.
Alcohol is super dehydrating. You have to, I don't even know the formula for that, but it really pulls water out of your system at a much higher rate.
And then, of course, if you're exercising.
If you're exercising, you've got to compensate for that also. And that's also where you're probably going to need some minerals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question I was going to bring up. I don't remember what it was, but one of the things that we talk about in the Healthy and Happy stuff is a great place to start is to eat real food.
Yeah.
Our brains know what to do with real food.
Yeah.
And when we consume a lot of chemicals, our brains don't know what to do with them.
They don't.
Or this, do I get rid of, what do I do with this? And so then our brains don't know what to do with that, and it starts wreaking havoc. And so just starting by consuming real food and drinking enough water, just that will get the ball rolling a little bit.
Oh, very much so.
And then I want to return to an important thing that you said. When it comes to nutrition, and many of you that are listening to this may feel really overwhelmed by all of the noise out there. There's lots and lots of opinion, lots of voice around nutrition. And one of the things, like everything in the Healthy and Happy program, there is good science on this.
Yeah.
And if you follow the science, you can trust the recommendations. You can get an opinion and you can get an anecdote for anything, for any diet, for any result, for any symptom. But in order for something to be statistically valid, it has to work for most people. And so going to sources that you can really trust is really important when it comes to trying to make nutritional decisions. And in terms of how, sort of what kind of effort you need to go into, Cindy made a really good point, which is it really depends on what's going on. If you're struggling with depression, then there are different things that you can do nutritionally to address that. And you've got to get clinical doses or therapeutic doses of the things that positively affect nutrition, and make sure that you're not consuming the things that negatively affect that. If you're having anxiety, if you're having sleep problems, or you have high blood pressure, or what your brain is foggy, you have PMS issues. If you're struggling with specific symptomology, then you want to start looking at the specific things that will positively affect those particular symptoms. You don't have to cover all your bases at therapeutic doses for everything.
Right. That's very true. Sometimes people, that is very true. And also sometimes people
correct me.
No, you're absolutely right. But in addition to that, sometimes if we're used to eating a diet that's not very healthy, or that is adding things that are harming our brain health, or is not providing things that would benefit our brain health, we don't know how good we would feel if we didn't have those things. It's like I heard one comparison to eyeglasses, prescription eyeglasses. You didn't realize what you weren't seeing until you put your glasses on.
I was like, whoa, there's
right.
a whole world out there.
Yes, and so sometimes
that can be a little scary when you're looking in the mirror.
Yes.
Oh, I think I'll take these glasses off.
There's always an advantage to blurred vision, at times. Like you get the rose-colored glasses effect. But it can be interesting. Sometimes people think that they feel fine or as good as they're ever going to feel, or nothing's terribly wrong, that they're so used to feeling subpar that they don't realize how good they would feel with a good multivitamin, a fish oil, a vitamin D, or with a bit of protein at every meal, along with a vegetable, and and some good healthy fat, your nuts or seeds, olives, all of that. Olive oil is amazing.
That's a really good point, because most of the time we don't go from feeling really good to feeling really poorly. Most of the time it's a very gradual descent down to feeling poorly and to developing symptoms. And so a lot of times when you're here, you don't even realize that you were here, or that you could be here.
Right. And maybe you were here and you really should have been here,
Right. Or you could have been. Yeah.
That your potential is, up here. And that's so true. And it's really sad that a lot of times we don't start to make a change until we're at the abysmal low.
Yeah, pain motivates. And it frequently isn't until we're in enough pain to be motivated to make a difference. But I hear people probably every day in my office complaining about things that they don't need to be living with, and a lot of times they'll just kind of say it in passing that, they're getting 4 hours of sleep a night, or their PMS is really bad. Or, they really struggle with brain fog and being able to, to recall and to think, you just don't feel like they're hitting on all cylinders. And, and one of the things that messages that I would like conveyed is that you absolutely can do something about that. And our brains are designed to work well. And our, one of the things I like to say too is that our brains are eager to please. And if we get our brains the resources that they need to be healthy, they're happy to respond with being healthy.
Yeah, that's the preferred state.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I want to go in two directions.
Cool. Write the other one down.
So if somebody's just kind of starting to or wanting to start taking control of their nutrition, what are some kind of general guidelines in terms of like what an average meal should include, how frequently, how many meals, what are some kind of general guidelines there?
Right. So that, there are general guidelines, and then there are also bio-individual preferences, or things that we're all bio-individuals. So some things work better for some people than others. Some people do better with 3 meals a day. Some people do better with 6 little meals a day. If your energy is sagging, your motivation is sagging, things are becoming problematic during the day, you maybe, if on a 3-meal schedule or a 2-meal schedule or 3 meals and a snack, whatever, you might want to consider a little more. Sometimes what can be a blood sugar dip feels to us like fatigue. It doesn't always feel like stomach hunger. It might feel like a loss of focus, a loss of interest, a slag. Yeah, exactly what the gesture you just made. But yeah. So if that's happening with meal, like if you're doing 3 meals and that's happening, might want to consider a smaller. Some people do really well with a smaller window of eating. Maybe they have something light for breakfast like bone broth. But in general, where I would usually start with most people, what happened to the light? I don't know.
Come, yeah. If you come a little bit forward towards your screen, I think it'll grab you instead of the background. It's that nice Texas sun that's.
I know, and it's setting, so like my lit room just got dark. But let's see. Okay, so where I would start with most people is usually I'm going to start with 3 meals a day and a snack. People are very interested in intermittent fasting, which is time-restricted eating. There are some definite neurological benefits associated with that. However, there are also some issues, like adrenal fatigue. And sometimes when people restrict their eating to a minimal amount of time, they don't get all of the calories in that they need and all of the nutrients in that they need. And they start to go low calorie instead of just time restricted. Low calorie dieting is associated with, like, within 2 weeks, you've got a 40% drop in dopamine production, which is your energy, motivation, happy, focused, in love type of brain chemical. So you don't want to get.
How quickly does that happen?
Within 2 weeks, you're down by 40%. In just a few days, you have a precipitous drop in all of your neurotransmitters. Except you, depending on how frequently you've done this and how fatigued your adrenals are, you will have a spike of adrenaline and cortisol to get you through. If you've been doing it too much, your adrenals can't even mount that boost of energy, like that stress run from a tiger energy. Yeah. So it really depends on the person. I've seen some people be successful with it and have benefits. And I've seen some people go really spiral into a hole in terms of mood, in terms of physical health. Other people, are compatible with it. But where I start, and it does have benefits like what's called autophagy, which is when cells are eating the damaged cells, you just kind of clean out the garbage in the cellular structure and all of that. And so there is autophagy. We should have a break from eating that's about 12 hours, which is easy. Like if we finish dinner at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m., don't eat breakfast till 7 a.m. the next morning. That's easy. Some people take it farther, and that is really depending on the individual. But in general, I would say, let's say every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you want to always have some protein, some fat, some carbohydrate. I like the visual of a plate. When I work with individuals, I can get more specific if they would like me to, or if they want that much help. But in general, if you envision a plate and you've got half of the plate is going to be vegetables, a quarter of the plate is going to be protein, and maybe a quarter of the plate is going to be whether it, some sort of nice carbohydrate, healthy carbohydrate source. Like it might be a starch, like, brown rice or sweet potato, or it might be a fruit. It might be a grain, depending on your preferences and what works for you. That you've got to have some. It's really good to have some carbohydrate for most people. And and definitely you want some healthy fat in there. So on your vegetables, put a little bit of, grass-fed butter. Kerrygold has a great butter, or ghee if you're sensitive to dairy proteins, or olive oil. But the nutrients in vegetables are more absorbable if you consume them with fat. The benefits of protein are more absorbable if you consume it with fat. Things work really well together. And when you have complementary nutrients, you can make better use of the nutrients in each individual food.
So what I'll do, tell me what you think about this. What I'll do to throw in fat into a meal, I'll eat some nuts.
Yeah.
Eat some mixed nuts or some cashews or something, just for the express intent of getting some fat included into whatever I'm doing.
Right. I do that too. If I'm eating something and I know it doesn't have enough fat content, you always want to have the fats. And we were talking about brain health. There is some interesting research that demonstrates that, and again, this is bio-individual. We got to see what works for each person. And it's no good to try to do something you can't do that just sets you up for, a crash, either in mood, energy, blood sugar. You want a giant low nutrient density chocolate cake instead of eating your dinner because you completely depleted yourself by not eating enough all day. So we don't want to set anybody up for that. But, and now I lost my train of thought. But where was I? What was I talking about? Oh, I know. Okay, so interesting research. And I've told you before, I worry a little about, I don't want people to feel restrictive, but I do want them to be aware of options and potential outcomes. So there's some interesting research that was showing recently a mostly carbohydrate-based diet, which is what a lot of Americans have. We eat a lot of bread, a lot of, muffins, bagels, refined carbohydrates, pasta. So a carbohydrate-based diet carries the highest risk for developing Alzheimer's. A protein-based diet carries a lower risk of developing Alzheimer's, and a predominantly fat-based diet produces the lowest risk of developing Alzheimer's. And, you don't want to take that too literally, but it's good to know. It certainly makes you not want to do the crazy restrictive low fat bit, because that is very good for your brain. Even with cholesterol, there's a linear relationship between your cholesterol level and your cognitive function. So we keep, recently there's been a trend to demonize cholesterol, get it as low as you can. But actually under 160 is associated with increased mortality of all sorts, and higher levels of cholesterol come with higher cognition. Of course, you don't want to be getting your, you want to be eating healthy foods, and excess refined carbohydrates actually tend to raise your bad cholesterol more than fat consumption does. So
yeah, those are good.
Interesting. Yeah, but so I would always like to have some kind of a nice carbohydrate on about a quarter of the plate, a protein on about a quarter of the plate, and nice, vegetables on a quarter of the plate.
Half of the plate.
Excuse me?
Veggies on half of the plate?
Yeah, because vegetables are very nutrient dense, but they're not very calorically dense. And so it takes a lot of them to get the nutrients, and they're magnificent. The benefits from the different plant chemicals are astounding. I mean, more and more research comes out. I mean, it's like cruciferous vegetables help you regulate estrogen, which helps with, all kinds of things. You mentioned PMS earlier. it reduces your cancer risk. I mean, they have so many specific mechanisms of improving your health. It's incredible.
And what about snacks?
Again, depends on the person. But I still like snacks to be relatively balanced, like maybe a little, there are types of turkey jerky or, beef jerky that don't have the added sugar. That are like spice mixes and things like that, and that are grass fed and all of that, or pasture raised, something like that, or a hard boiled egg, some nuts, but also a little, if I am going to have somebody have some protein, I would really like them to have a little carbohydrate and fat also.
An applesauce or
an apple. I mean, better yet, an apple, because you haven't broken down the fiber.
Right.
Yeah, but applesauce can be nice too.
And behaviorally, one of the things that I think is really important, because again, it can feel really overwhelming to eat well and to plan and meal prep and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's really important to figure out a way to be able to incorporate it into your life. And so I certainly have work to do in my nutrition, but I do best if I eat about every 3 hours.
Yeah.
And I exercise pretty aggressively every day. And so I normally will try to have a pretty good breakfast. And then I eat, and I do smoothies. And so I put tons of veggies and tons of fruits in my smoothies. And then I eat half of that smoothie at about 11 o'clock with a protein shake and some nuts. And then at about 2, I eat the other half of the smoothie, typically with some jerky and then some more nuts. Yeah. And that tends to get me pretty well through the day. And then try to have a balanced dinner with, at least 2 additional veggies and then the other stuff.
I think that's a really good way.
Well, and it's a way. I'm at my office all day, and so I can't stop. And I also, because I want to exercise every day, I typically take my break in the day to exercise, and so I can eat those meals or drink those meals literally in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it's a way. You've got to find a way to incorporate it in. At other times, sometimes I'll have clients say, okay, so start with at least 5 fruits and veggies a day, and plan when you're going to get them in. If you're going to eat a fruit with breakfast, and then a fruit and a veggie at lunch, and then 2 veggies at dinner, that there's a way that you can incorporate it in. Make it portable. A handful of carrots or some broccoli, raw broccoli, if your tummy can handle it. My tummy doesn't do very well with that. Cucumbers, tomatoes, if you like them. I hate tomatoes, but figuring out a way to make it work in your life, so that it doesn't feel like this overwhelming thing. Because and again, kind of depending on personality, those of you that are familiar with core, if you're either an R or an O, then you have really low levels of tolerance for hassle. And so setting yourself up to have to do a lot of hassle to be successful with your nutrition, you're going to end up running to McDonald's or whatever, because it's just, it's not congruent with the way that your brain works temperament wise. And so you got to be smart enough to set yourself up to succeed. Right.
I think those are excellent ideas. And like the vegetables you mentioned, carrying some carrots, take one of those little mini things of hummus or avocado that you can get at Costco with your slices or whatever. And it can be great. Then you've got, if you're doing the hummus, you've got some carbohydrate and fat along with your vegetable. And, and if you can throw in whatever works for you, depending on your food sensitivities and such, some bit of protein, maybe it's beans for someone. The hummus is a nice garbanzo bean usually. The avocado is good. You could dip your hard-boiled egg in it, whatever. Yeah. And they even have these convenient little packages of pre-boiled and peeled hard-boiled eggs, and you can get them organic, you can get them pasture-raised. We have a lot more options now than we did before, but you're absolutely right. And that, the idea that you have to be able to do it and what works for you doesn't work for everybody is why I'm kind of, waffling on saying, what do I recommend people do? Because in general, yeah, that's where I would start. But depending on the individual and what works for them, I would adapt. And also, what are their health issues?
Right. Yeah. What symptomology do they need addressed or whatever, right?
The choice of food, the timing of meals, what is their lifestyle, what is their willingness. You can come up with the most, optimal or ideal program in the world. And if it's not doable for you, it really doesn't matter. It's totally junk, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a really good point. And we're probably about out of time, but I want you to know that there's a lot that you can do with this. Just kind of personal testimonial. About 8 years ago now, I had a really severe grand mal seizure, and I think there were a number of factors that were part of that. My job is pretty stressful, and it takes a lot to not have adrenal fatigue and those kinds of things. I was also, we lost a son 14 years ago, and in the wake of that, night was really tough, and sleeping was really hard. At the end of the day, you're sucking mud, and that's when the grief would really hit. And so I was taking Ambien to sleep and different things, and for a long time we thought Ambien was a great resource that didn't do what we know some of the benzos do. And one of the reasons why you sleep so well on a benzo is that it shuts the processing of the brain down. We can talk about sleep in another thing, but for a long time we thought Ambien was different, but it appears that it does the same thing. And so a lot of things were going on, but anyway, I was having these little seizures, and then I had this grand mal seizure, and I started taking anti-seizure medication. But then I called Cindy, and she put together a protocol for me that I started taking, and that I've been taking now for 7 or 8 years, and I've never had another seizure.
I'm so glad.
And I didn't make any other. I did stop taking the Ambien, but I didn't make any other behavioral changes in my life because I live a fairly healthy life. But I was deficient in the therapeutic levels necessary to have my myelin sheath and my neurological system working well, and the nutritional interventions that we've done have worked. So I want you to see that there's a lot that you can do. Cindy and I are also developing a Mood Mills program. Again, taking advantage of the vast amounts of information on the connection between nutrition and brain health and emotional health. and so we'll do a series of podcasts on specific disorders or challenges. We'll do one on nutrition and depression, and nutrition and sleep, and nutrition and anxiety, and PMS and mental fog, and these things. And we're also putting together specific protocols to help you with those different things. And so be looking for Mood Mills on the horizon. And if you're struggling with depression, we'll have nutritional packets for you to be able to take on the supplement side, to be able to make sure you're getting therapeutic doses that absolutely, I see it again every day with people that I work with in my office, and the effect that getting healthy levels of these things have. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that those things are coming down the pipeline also.
Can I throw in a little bit on that? Thank you. I really am so happy at how well the nutritional supplements and things like that work for depression. They consistently in research, the interventions that we're talking about, like 5-HTP is one of my favorite ones. St. John's wort is a good one. They work as well or better than pharmaceuticals. And some people need a pharmaceutical, and the combination will take the effectiveness from, I think one pharmaceutical I was looking at recently, I can't remember what it was. It was an anti-depression serotonergic. So it's boosting the serotonin, you're happy.
Right, yeah.
In the brain. And I think that the antidepressant had 50% remission, which is very high for antidepressants because they're usually in the 30s for remission. And the St. John's wort had 52%. The two combined had 80%. I mean, it's just really tremendous what you can do. And 60 to 80% of people who take antidepressants have sexual dysfunction and sexual side effects, which isn't great for the individual or for their relationship. No. And if you're already struggling, you don't want to take that away too, you know.
You don't.
And you don't generally have side effects like that with the nutritional supplements. With one of the other antidepressants, it was like 50% to 60% of people had unbearable side effects, so they wouldn't keep taking it. With St. John's wort, it was like 20%. People will stay on the nutritional products longer because they work as well or better, and they don't have the problematic side effects. And some of the prescription medications do change the way your brain works. Sometimes it's sometimes it's good, other times it's not. Like you mentioned, the benzos, they change the way the brain works. And in a scan, the surface has a poor intake of blood flow and such, and it looks like somebody's been drinking heavily. It has an effect, and the nutraceuticals can actually have a repairing effect.
And most people don't understand that. Most people that are taking them certainly don't understand that. And lots of people prescribing them don't understand some of the brain health ramifications of it. They're just trying to help you feel better.
Right. Even with the cognitive, with self-assessed memory memory slowdown, or with mild cognitive impairment, with certain nutraceuticals like phosphatidylserine, which is one of those things that you mentioned that along with DHA from fish oil, helps stabilize the cell membrane and the myelin sheaths and all that. In one study, it reverse aged the brain. We were able to assign a cognitive age to the brain based on certain tasks, and it reversed the brain aging by 12 years, which is another thing you don't want to take too seriously, but it's just so good to see that you can go backwards, you know?
Right. Yeah. And there again, our systems, including our brains, are designed to work well.
Right.
And when we give them the resources that they need, that typically happens.
Right.
We'll also be talking more about some eating disorder issues and some of the challenges that arise there with nutrition. Huge issues for lots, in particular women. It's tough to food and body image and stuff it's really difficult to be a female in our society in regards to that. And so we'll address some of those issues as well. So anyway, thank you, Cindy. Super awesome to visit with you. I always like a good excuse to talk to you. And
thank you. Likewise, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Okay.